Oh, Netflix have announced they are making a Bioshock movie. Now, I've enjoyed these games. I've enjoyed the political commentary of these games. You know, the anti-capitalist, anti-Ayn Rand, objectivist element of these games. I've enjoyed Bioshock Infinite, which is like held up a mirror to American exceptionalism and is a commentary on America at the turn of the 20th century. I'm sure all audiences are going to be ready for the political nuance and political discussion in Bioshock. Oh wait, Geeks and Gamers has put out a video about the new Bioshock. I bet the comments will be very enlightening. Every Bioshock game faced the harsh reality of life during a very discriminatory era in this country, which means they're going to politically correct their history to appease the woke mob who doesn't even care about the series. One of the things I loved about Bioshock was the political ambiguity. I was never sure if they were mocking Ayn Rand or praising her or both. That kind of nuance and subtlety is totally missing in current year games. If there are political overtones, they get shoved down your throat. Either you get left-wing in your face politics, or you play Mario Kart. The first Bioshock is one of my favourite games of all time. Love the world they created and the characters. When the screen dropped in the bathysphere to reveal Rapture, I was hooked. No way I'll get my hopes up a film adaptation will be any good with how Hollywood is handling themselves these days though. Can only hope it will be one that somehow avoids the wrath of leftist SJW nonsense. So we've covered Bioshock quite a lot on this channel. We've also covered how anti-SJWs generally do not understand their favourite game series, and that applies to Bioshock. You might remember my video where I took like stream archives of Abby Shapiro and her husband, who were showing about how woke groups ruin games by playing the original Bioshock, then saying they might also play Red Dead Redemption 2, two infamously conservative games apparently. But in today's video, what we're going to talk about is the anti-SJW reaction to just the announcement that Netflix are making a Bioshock movie. People are very, very scared the Bioshock movie will be woke SJW nonsense. So what we're going to do in the video today is talk about the reaction, talk about people like praising the game but like hating on the show already, despite the fact there's like no footage, no synopsis, no nothing, and then talk about how Bioshock, despite being a criticism of Ayn Rand capitalism, isn't inherently like leftist, but these guys will still think it's woke because of course it's criticizing a form of capitalism. And also people like Donald Trump, people like a lot of modern Republicans absolutely love Ayn Rand. If you are criticizing Ayn Rand's ideology, Ayn Rand's work, they're going to feel like it's an attack on them. And people like Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers are massive Trump supporters. Trump apparently says he loves Ayn Rand. I find it kind of hard to believe he's even read Ayn Rand. So I feel like they will take it as a personal attack on them. But just before we get any further, just going to say this is the first time I've filmed in the day in Spain. I try and film at night because it's less noisy, so I apologize if you kind of hear the mic trying to cut out the noise. I am running the NVIDIA software, which cuts out like echo and noise, but it's not perfect. Also, I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons on my Patreon as possible. If you want to support my work going forward, please consider becoming a patron. The benefits of that at the moment are getting my Nintendo Switch friend code and also getting access to the private patrons Discord server. Also follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. Come join our community on my subreddit. And also check out my second channel, the Kavernacle Extra, where I archive my live stream. Before we get into like a political analysis of like Bioshock versus Atlas Shrugged, and before we get into, I guess, how that influences the modern Republican Party to tie it back to like political themes, I first want to talk about the reaction. So like I said, Netflix have announced they are working on a film adaptation of Bioshock. We don't know if that means they're working on a film version of the original story. Are they making a film set in Rapture, maybe leading up to the events, maybe after the events of the first game, between the first and second game? Are they even doing something about Bioshock Infinite? We just do not know at this point. But that hasn't stopped anti-SJW channels freaking out. So here is our favourite, Jeremy, who seems to be one of the only bigger anti-SJW channels who could milk anti-woke content out of this like really minor news story. So let's take a look quick.
Netflix just announced that they are doing a film adaptation to Bioshock. Bioshock, the first Bioshock, is truly one of the best games I've ever played. And do you remember when we lived in a time when we could get excited when we heard that our, favorite series or our favorite comic or our favorite cartoon growing up was having an adaptation made. And then you have the left-wing crowd out there that wants to continue to cry every time people like me or you call it out. If you have never played the first Bioshock, I highly recommend playing that game. It is truly incredible. And it has a great storytelling. It has great twists. And it's scary, it's creepy, the environment's incredible, the gameplay is awesome. It is truly a fantastic game, and Netflix is more than likely going to ruin this like they have ruined so many other things before, because they're going to put social justice activists into it. They're going to push diversity, representation, inclusion. You know the song and dance, and we're tired of it.
Honestly, I find it kind of hard to believe that if Jeremy has indeed played the first Bioshock game and he loves it, that he would still love it if he understood all the political themes. This guy is like very, very sensitive about supposed like left-wing critiques in video games. Again, based on the criteria for what makes woke in this guy's opinion, are you seriously going to tell me that a guy who thinks like black dwarves in the Lord of the Rings Amazon show is woke wouldn't think quite a scathing criticism of Ayn Rand, capitalism, and objectivism isn't woke? That's kind of like the criteria we're playing with here, because in theory, you can be some sort of capitalist and hate Ayn Rand, because a lot of her ideology is like totally insane, right? Like having like this greed and this free market capitalism like dictate morals. The government should kind of stay out of people's business and the economy, except to kind of protect some individual liberties. Again, as games go, Bioshock is one of the most political, and a lot of conservatives, especially American conservatives, who kind of like get raised on Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand gets promoted in various conservative organizations as like a must-read person. A lot of people see her as like an intellectual titan like Paul Ryan or Donald Trump. Again, I cannot believe that an American conservative who makes their whole living on being anti-SJW wouldn't see Bioshock as woke if they understood it, but they might just be saying this because I have a long-running theory that Jeremy often just says stuff that he thinks will appeal to his audience, like him loving the new Dune film. And I think general anti-SJWs and even people like Ben Shapiro just say they like stuff when it's popular because they don't want to be seen as like uncool or something. So I just want to play you one more video quick before we get into some of these like crazy comments about this stuff as well. So there's a guy called Lack of Entertainment, and his video is called No Gods or Kings, Only Soy.
And then it's the story. Like, for those of you who don't know, the story is inspired by a very popular artist called Ayn Rand. Now, Ayn Rand is a pro-capitalist woman that also wrote Atlas Shrugged and other really great works. And despite the fact that leftists really hate her for some reason, like they can't articulate why, but they really despise her writings and oh, those are horrible. But when you look at it, like, it's a bestseller. Like, all her books sell. So it's the Ayn Rand ideology which is translated into Bioshock, and that's why you have Andrew Ryan. It's a play on the word Ayn Rand, for those of you who don't know. And it's really awesome, especially the first game, where you get to see how taking like the best and brightest, like taking libertarians, which by themselves are hardy people, because that's why you're a libertarian, right? You can take care of yourself. And I don't know if Netflix even has the mental capacity to understand this in order to make a TV show that's based on Ayn Rand's books. I don't think they can even know. Like, all their writers are leftists. This is way too difficult and complex for a leftist to understand. Like, leftists like, oh, her work is evil. Her are anti-work. Her work consent, blah, blah, blah. Right? Like, they don't understand any of it. I don't think they're going to even manage to get the story down, let alone have some interesting plot twist that can be adapted for a TV show.
So I find that stuff quite funny, like, because Ayn Rand's books sold well, it means they're like legit or something, and that libertarians are like hardy people, and leftists would not be able to write a story based on like the political themes of the first game. And also, leftists can't articulate why they don't like Ayn Rand. Are you serious? People who are anti-capitalist cannot articulate why they don't like an objectivist capitalist who thinks like the free market should basically rule your whole life and there shouldn't be like any ethical restraints. The belief that most workers are like parasites and the captains of industry are necessary for the well-being of society. I read you a couple comments at the start. I'm not going to go back over them. I'm just going to show you some of the delusion online quick before we get into some more political analysis. It's sad, but the first thing we all think is how are we going to inject identify politics and left-wing narratives into this? Sadly, that's where we are at today. I miss being able to get excited for new stuff. How many franchises that my wife and I love will be ruined by leftist companies? Leftist companies, there are loads and loads of leftist companies, especially Netflix. Woke mob, yes. I just hope Daily Wire gets a hold of some scripts from these gaming IPs. If Daily Wire was making this, then I'd be excited. When have Daily Wire ever made anything good? And a Daily Wire version of Bioshock would make Andrew Ryan out to be the hero. No, 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 another epic franchise destroyed by the Church of Woke. By my guess, it will be a major smear piece against Rand, like 99% of media about her out there, but I do believe a good movie would be possible. These are, however, not mutually exclusive, as Bioshock was wrong on Rand on many points. Well, Bioshock's literally whole existence is criticising Ayn Rand's ideology and her personal hypocrisy. I don't know how you'd make a Rapture-based Bioshock game without talking about this stuff. Woke are drowning, therefore trying to clutch at anything they can reach. Franchises are like rescue boats for them. Unfortunately, they will capsize all franchises into the abyss because they have no clue on how these boats operate. So on the tweet saying, we all make choices, but in the end, our choices make us. Netflix vs Bioshock, would you kindly stay tuned? Someone saying, I can't wait for this super woke and miss the entire point of the game's philosophical and moral underpinnings. Oh no, this is very bad news. As a fan of the Bioshock universe, knowing how these producers and managers of Netflix are doing the adaptation, it will be very bad. The whole point of the game will be missed, but your main goal is to insert a progressive agenda. I'm going to get into this a bit later, and I've already touched on it. Obviously, I don't think you have to be like a massive progressive to not like Ayn Rand, but it's pretty clear like a lot of these criticisms come from like a more progressive place at least, and you can easily have a more leftist reading on Bioshock than you can have, apparently, like Abby Shapiro's husband, a right-wing reading where it's basically saying that Rapture failed based on objectivist capitalism. What you need is conservative capitalism. I know the second game kind of goes the opposite way to criticize collectivism, but let's just remember the second game is not actually made by the same people who made the first and Infinite. So I just find it pretty hilarious that these people complain that they're going to make Bioshock woke, because these people probably do not understand it. If you were having a conversation with someone, they said, well, I'm scared that Netflix are going to miss the point of the politics and miss the point of the philosophy and inject woke politics. And you said, well, the politics of the first game are a massive criticism of objectivist capitalism and just the free market like run amok. And also criticizing Andrew Ryan for being a massive hypocrite, just like Ayn Rand was a massive hypocrite. So like, what do you think of that? And they would definitely go, oh yeah, that's not woke. I hope they stick true to that game. Again, I find it very, very hard to believe that anyone complaining about the potential for Bioshock going woke actually understands the source material. Now let's get into some analysis of Bioshock and Ayn Rand, because it's very, very on the nose. It's always been on the nose. Andrew Ryan, Ayn Rand, a character called Atlas. There's loads of references to the actual book. There's so much commentary on this stuff. Of course, Rapture is meant to be like this libertarian, free market paradise where the only thing that dictates a lot of stuff is the free market. Also, there's two things going on here. The dystopic element can even be seen before the fall of Rapture, because here you have a society that uses like children to farm Adam, which makes these plasmids to give them superhuman abilities. If you go into a lot of the audio logs and the different bosses you fight throughout the game and the characters, people who are into like cosmetic surgery and how there are no limits to what they can do, and basically how they just ruin people's lives. But now I want to compare it to Atlas Shrugged, the book. And I got a couple articles here that I think do a really, really good job comparing them in different ways before we get on to how Ayn Rand is still relevant politically, and how criticizing Ayn Rand for a lot of these Trump-supporting anti-SJWs would probably be like criticizing their own favorite conservatives. So John Robertson at Ars Technica, why Bioshock still has and will always have something to say. Rapture's founder and ruler Andrew Ryan, the embodiment of Ayn Rand. Both Rand and Ryan grew up in the Soviet Union under strict communist regimes, experiencing the kind of poverty and injustice that sometimes results from a system where the individual liberty is sidelined. In Bioshock, Ryan moves to the US to escape communism, and doing so uses his intelligence and foresight to become a wealthy businessman in the comparatively free West. His American dream doesn't last long, though. In the face of the economic depression caused by the Wall Street crash of 1929, the US government takes more control over its financial systems in order to prevent the same economic catastrophe from happening again. Ryan's days of being able to act as he pleases in his pursuit of his own self-interest are over. Having seen the pain that he believes communism and an active state can cause, Ryan concocts a plan to build the ultimate objectivist paradise, an underwater city free from the stranglehold of state influence, where the best and brightest are free to do as they see fit. So an article on Entropy by Anthony Perota, Bioshock and the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. Her ideology is certainly atheistic in nature. Rand believed heavily in what Adam Smith referred to as the invisible hand, a metaphor used to describe social benefit resulting from individual actions, perhaps in a loose form of income redistribution that bears a resemblance to trickle-down economics, which was popularized during the Reagan era. These two counterweights mirror the beliefs of Bioshock's antagonist. I believe in no God, no invisible man in the sky, but there is something more powerful than each of us, a combination of our efforts, a great chain of industry that unites us, Ryan preaches. Rapture was finally out of government control, scientific progress expanded greatly. However, one of the many unregulated businesses in the supposed utopia was the Atom industry, whose product is extremely scarce, alters the user's DNA, and grants them superhuman powers like telekinesis and pyrokinesis.
There has been tremendous pressure to regulate this plasmid business. There have been side effects, blindness, insanity, death. But what use is our ideology if it is not tested? The market does not respond like an infant, shrieking at the first sign of displeasure. The market is patient, and we must be too.
Ayn Rand once stated, every horror of history was committed in the name of an altruistic motive. Has any act of selfishness ever equaled the carnage perpetuated by disciples of altruism? This is very similar to the musings of Ryan. What is the greatest lie ever created? Oh, it's a tool with which all wickedness is built. Altruism. Ryan then goes on to ask, how many catastrophes were launched with the words, think of yourself? Ayn Rand and Andrew Ryan share many similarities. They both met very different ends. Rand passed away from heart failure in 1982. At the time of her death, she was sick from lung cancer and was ironically collecting Medicare and Social Security from an institution responsible for creating a culture of dependency, also known as the US government. So that was just comparing Ryan and Rand. So this is a good thing comparing Atlas Shrugged and Bioshock. The myth of Atlantis, Atlas Shrugged and Bioshock. Atlas Shrugged takes place in the very near future. Giant corporations that turned the US into an economic powerhouse had begun to dissolve. DC reacts with legislation designed to prop up failing businesses, measures to keep them from competing with each other or to force them to cooperate. After an epic cross-country chase, the main character Dagny finds a secluded mountain hideaway protected by holographic illusions. The world's greatest creative minds have retreated here, pursuing their masterpieces in private. They pay no income tax and perform no charity. They work for the joy of working and trade in mutual benefit to each other. And the entire Gulch is powered by a motor driven by atmospheric electricity, the invention of John Galt. Galt tells Dagny what he told each of these fugitives, that society will never value the importance of creators so long as creators remain around to sustain society. It's the output of rational people that allows the irrational to survive, and at the same time to question why the rational people should get all the acclaim. These inventors and artists didn't walk away from their careers regretfully, they walked away joyfully, laying down the burden of supporting an ungrateful world. They were Atlases, supporting the world on their shoulders. When the time came, they shrugged it off. John Galt, in Atlas Shrugged, served two opposed purposes, the creator and the destroyer. He invents amazing machines that make futuristic advances possible, but he also sabotages the world around him in guerrilla warfare. Bioshock splits his character into two separate roles. The creator, Andrew Ryan, is a business tycoon and a genius of electrical engineering. He's the one who created Rapture, powering it with geothermal energy from sub-oceanic volcanoes. He considers every attempt to share or tax his wealth the work of parasites. He fled the surface world in 1947, building Rapture as a haven for creators who wanted to avoid the reach of governments. The destroyer Atlas is a populist hero who rises to oppose Ryan. He strikes back at Big Daddies and Little Sisters and liberates Adam to power his allies. He sabotages the machinery, keeping Rapture intact under the ocean. Smugglers keep him supplied with arms and ammo. His popularity grows. Posters of a faceless hero begin to appear on the walls everywhere. Who is Atlas? Bioshock includes a sympathetic character in the form of Bill McDonough, Andrew Ryan's chief engineer. He becomes enthralled with Ryan after working for him in the surface world.
I met Ryan the day me and the lads were installing the bathroom plumbing up in his Posh Park Avenue digs. Wait, says he, what's with all the brass fittings? General contractor had me down for the tip. Well, I says, I suppose it's the contractor then who'll be bailing out your loo once a fortnight, is it? If it's price you're worried about, I'll be picking up the brass, so not to worry, Squire. And why would you be doing that, says he? Well, Mr. Ryan, profit or not, no man bails water out of privies built by Bill McDonough. Next day I finds out I'm Ryan's new general contractor.
The aftermath of the Civil War in Rapture with Frank Fontaine sours McDonough. When Ryan seizes Fontaine's business holdings rather than dispose of them officially, McDonough sees it as more of the same old mess he had fled to the surface to avoid.
Mr. Ryan, I believe in Rapture, but that doesn't mean we always win. Fontaine Futuristics It's the biggest thing going in Rapture. So let me be plain. When we arrest that Torag Fontaine for his thieving and smuggling, we must make it clear that we won't touch his business interests. We sit on the council because these poor sods trust us, not because God gave us a chair.
Finally, as Atlas threatens the city with his guerrilla sabotage, which is where you, the player, come in, McDonough's messages to Ryan grow increasingly more desperate. McDonough realizes that Ryan's betrayed his own ideals and has taken for himself the power that he despised. Further, in making Adam freely available for his followers, Ryan bred an army of monsters McDonough can't sit idly by. So very, very interesting analysis there of Atlas Shrugged and Bioshock. And like I was saying before, Andrew Ryan is a massive hypocrite as well, just like Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, who, when she passed away, was on Social Security and Medicare, the two things she had essentially railed against her entire life. She believed people on these systems were parasites, but before she passed away, she ended up using these systems, just like Andrew Ryan, creating this whole society on like objectivist capitalism, but then by the end betraying all this, becoming more authoritarian, becoming a dictator. But people sometimes read that as the game trying to say that if Andrew Ryan stuck to objectivist principles, Rapture would have worked out okay. But of course, Rapture is already a pretty sick dystopia before the Civil War. The things that go on in Rapture that you experience through the game and the audio logs, what people were up to before the Civil War, are completely abhorrent and insane. So even before the fall of Rapture, it is criticizing Ayn Rand's ideology. The criticism isn't that because Andrew Ryan abandoned this, that Rapture fell. So yes, it is criticizing capitalism generally, but mainly targeting Ayn Rand specifically, and how this world she envisioned is essentially just going to bring out the worst of humanity. And like I said at the start, you don't have to be anti-capitalist, you don't have to be a communist or a leftist to think Ayn Rand's ideology is like pretty insane and like pretty gross, and would lead to a situation which would have similar like themes to what Rapture became. But Ayn Rand is someone that the Republican Party in modern times has embraced more and more. So that's why I believed if anti-SJWs who love Donald Trump actually knew the message of Bioshock, they probably wouldn't be saying, I can't believe this is going to go woke, or I'm scared it's going to go woke. They'd probably hate it already for being woke. An article by Jonathan Friedland talking about Ayn Rand's modern influence. Rand has always had acolytes in conservative political classes. Talking about Paul Ryan again. He was famous for giving every new member of his staff a copy of Rand's Atlas Shrugged. But for some, objectivism stuck. Perhaps her most significant early follower was Alan Greenspan, later to serve as a chairman of the US Federal Reserve for 19 years. In the 1950s, Greenspan was one of the collective, and he would be among the mourners at her funeral in 1982, where one floral wreath was fashioned into the same 6-foot dollar sign, now understood to be the logo of Randism. Greenspan is the link between the original Rand cult and what we might think of the second age of Rand, the Thatcher-Reagan years, when the laissez-faire free market philosophy went from the crankish obsession of right-wing economists to the governing credo of Anglo-American capitalism. Greenspan, appointed as the US's central banker by Ronald Reagan in 1987, firmly believed that market forces unimpeded were the best mechanism for the management and distribution of society's resources, just like Rapture, just like Ayn Rand. That view, which Greenspan would rethink after the crash in 2008, rested on the assumption that economic actors behave rationally, always acting in their own self-interest. The primacy of self-interest rather than altruism or any other non-material motive was, of course, a central tenet of Randian thought. The reason why Republicans and conservatives started giving each other copies of Atlas Shrugged in the 80s was that Rand seemed to grant intellectual heft to the prevailing ethos of the time. Her insistence on the morality of rational self-interest and the virtue of selfishness sounded like an upmarket version of the slogan derived from Oliver Stone's Wall Street that defined the era, greed is good. Rand was Gordon Gekko with A-levels. Third age of Rand came from the financial crash and the presidency of Obama. Spooked by the fear that Obama was bent on expanding the state, the Tea Party and others returned to the old-time religion of rolling back government. As Rand biographer Jennifer Burns told Quartz, in moments of liberal dominance, people turn to her because they see Atlas Shrugged as a prophecy as what's going to happen if the government is given too much power. What of the current movement shaping to be the fourth age of Rand? The Randian politicians are still in place. Ryan is now boosted by cabinet, crowned with objectivists. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson named Atlas Shrugged as his favourite book, while Donald Trump's first choice as Labour Secretary, Andy Husder, is the CEO of a restaurant chain owned by Rourke Capital Group. a private equity fund named after the hero, the Fountainhead. CIA Director Mike Pompeo is another conservative who says Atlas Shrugged really had an impact on me. Of course, this merely makes these men like their boss. Trump is notoriously no reader of books. He has only ever spoken about liking free works of fiction, but inevitably one of them was The Fountainhead. It relates to business, beauty, life, and inner emotions. A book relates to everything. So why does Trump claim to be inspired by Rand? The answer surely is that Rand lionizes the alpha male capitalist entrepreneur, the man of action who towers over little people and the pettifogging bureaucrats and gets things done. As Jennifer Burns puts it, for a long time, she has been beloved by disruptors, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, people who see themselves as shaping the future, taking risky bets, moving out in front of everyone else, relying only on their own instincts, intuition, and knowledge, and going against the grain. So traditionally, during her own lifetime, Ayn Rand's work wasn't like completely accepted in the Republican Party, mainly because she was an atheist and didn't put an emphasis on God. But with the Reagan-Thatcher era, the massive movement for like neoliberalism coming from the Western countries, especially the UK and the US, they of course embraced this greed is good, you know, Gordon Gekko, like I said in the article from Oliver Stone's Wall Street, in that pursuing maximum profit somehow allows society to work itself out. Trickle down economics. If the businessmen are making money, everyone is making money, according to these people who've essentially destroyed our world. And the thing is as well, people are so brainwashed now in that they call themselves capitalists, but they just latch on to this form of capitalism where it's better to have like no government interference. It's better to have a free market system without regulation. It's better that there's no protections for people. Ayn Rand's philosophy can be easily dismissed by anyone who just like, I don't know, keeps up on economics or reads the news. Of course, we live in an age where capitalism is literally destroying the whole planet, but people will still cling to this ideology as the best system. And it's depressing. It's seemingly becoming more widespread as the world is getting worse from these types of ideologies. Tie it all back to the anti-SJW point. The fact that so many of these Republicans and Donald Trump himself believes in this Randian philosophy, and not only the philosophy, the way she loves like tycoons and businessmen and thinks they're like the best people in society, you can see why that if right-wing anti-SJWs actually knew what Bioshock was criticizing, they would probably think it's woke anyway. And I would say by and large, as a game that criticizes like capitalism, it's fairly left-leaning, but I don't believe you actually have to be a leftist to take something from the message and actually agree with the message that Ayn Rand capitalism will lead to an awful society, will lead to a dystopian society, because in part, Ayn Rand's influence has led us to that dystopian society. We do not need Rapture to see the influence of Ayn Rand. We only have to look at our current world. So I will never stop finding it hilarious that people will say, don't make my Bioshock woke. Don't make my Metal Gear Solid woke. Don't make Death Stranding woke. Don't make all these games with a left-leaning anti-capitalist message or anti-imperialist message woke. It just shows conservative media literacy is so poor. They literally cannot understand that a game where the villain is called Andrew Ryan and the other villain is called Atlas, and there are so many references to Ayn Rand throughout the whole thing, they cannot understand this is a game criticizing a person called Ayn Rand, who is like a mother of modern objectivist capitalism. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you want to join my community, come join my subreddit. If you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and on Instagram. If you want to support my work, please check out my Patreon. Thanks for sticking through the video. I've been feeling really awful lately because I had a migraine, and whenever I have one, I have like this horrible like after effect for like the next 2 weeks. So hopefully I was my usual self, and you know, anyone who's here didn't notice that, but thanks for sticking with it. And if you made it through the whole video, thank you for watching.